Thank you, Nidhi. And in terms of questions, you can start. You can write your questions in the Q&A section below that you will see as we speak. So please keep coming your questions on our way. It turns out that except for me, all the people on the screen have some relationship with UPSC. So of course, Raju sir, you already have passed and worked in the government. Others have attempted, all four other people here have attempted UPSC exam. So I'm the only one left out of that unique opportunity. Yeah. So let me say a couple of things before we get into the sort of ISPP and the career in public policy. So when I was in college, of course, it's a long time ago, one of the things I did, as some of you probably also have done, is to join a Pad Yatra of Chandrasekhar, who was one of the prime ministers in those days. And he was walking from Kanyakumari, of course, to Delhi, just like many others who have done since then. Right? And during the evening, when we get together after walking for the day, there are a lot of young people in the Padyatra, and many of us would keep asking veterans who were there from industry, from political life, that what can we do to help the country? Right? And we, of course, all of us were motivated by that desire. And the typical answer we would get is that go and live in the village. Right? So India lives in her villages. So that if you want to do something for India, you also need to go and live in a village. Right? So make the village your karma bhumi. Right? And that was the answer most commonly given. And I say to myself, well, I like my urban life too much. Right? So, and I discovered public policy much later when I was doing graduate studies in the US. And I realized that public policy actually is also a very effective way to build India of our dreams. And you don't really have to live in a village to be able to do that. Right? So I find that public policy is a very effective tool to do what we want to do, irrespective of whatever other preferences we have. It's also true that public policy is really a home of what I will call outcasts. So what you will find in public policy is that all of us who come to this discipline, right, have basically rejected whichever discipline we studied earlier. Right. So, for example, I studied pharmacy, was my undergrad degree in Baroda. Right. Then I went to do a PhD in economics without any master's or MPhil in the middle. Right. So it's an interesting transition from pharmacy to economics. Then, of course, I came back to India and been doing public policy. Right. So people who work in public policy are usually outcast of the disciplines they have studied. Right. And this is really, in a sense, home of the outcasts, right? So I welcome you all, sort of would-be outcasts, to public policy, and have this discussion. I think it's an important discussion we are going to have in terms of what kind of careers you can pursue in serving the nation that you want to serve. So let me stop that and invite Rajiv Kapoor to make his opening comments.
Thanks, Parth, and welcome everyone to this webinar. And thanks, ISPP, for giving me this opportunity to be participant here. It's a very interesting question in terms of what are non-UPSC public policy careers and how ISPP contributes towards that. I think that is the broad thing that we would like to focus on. So I think first thing we must keep in mind, and as Bart said that, I am a veteran in terms of having served in government for 35, 40 years through the UPSC route. So maybe I'm not the best placed person to talk about non-UPSC route, but what I have seen over years and how things are evolving, I should be able to comment on that. So first thing, we must keep in mind that in public policy, public comes before policy. I mean, that is the rationale for everything. It's about public. So it's not about government. Public policy is not about government. It's about public. It's about solving problems of public through policy, through programs. So public remains in focus in public policy. It has to remain in focus. And it can't remain in focus if public policy is the stronghold only of bureaucrats. It cannot, because they will have only one perspective in terms of getting things done. And I have seen so many examples where we sometimes forget that our job is to serve particular clientele. It's not just to satisfy our own, whims or, our own interest that, oh, this appears to be a very interesting thing to do, so let's do it. No. If it doesn't solve a problem which is perceived by public as public problem, then it's not worth doing. So who will tell what is a public problem? First thing is that you need groups within society, civil society, who will advocate for correct causes. In fact, if I wouldn't be very wrong if I were to say that most of the problems in public policy are not about solutions. They are about not attacking the right problem, not prioritizing. What should government be focusing on? Government focuses on many things which are totally irrelevant for public. Public wants very simple things in terms of rule of law, in terms of transparency, in terms of employment opportunity, fairly working economy, fairness. Those are things that public needs from government. But then government has its own priorities because of its own political ideology. So sometimes we forget that it's the public which is at the core. It's not the policy which is at the core. Policy is a tool. Policy is a tool to satisfy public demands, satisfy or solve public problems. So in that context, if I see the role of, let's say, our premier civil service, which is IAS, which has most say in public policy making, not so much making, but certainly public policy implementation. And that is where the role of UPSC route comes. And I would not belittle it. But firstly, I think it's a fantastic opportunity if you were to work in the field for first 10 years as a public policy practitioner, not designer, in terms of implementing policy. I still feel I have had ups and downs in my service. I have like any other job, you will have pluses, you will have minuses. I have had tough times. I have had very good times. But I would still not trade my first 10 years in service with anything else. There is nothing in this country, certainly, maybe elsewhere, where you can get that kind of job satisfaction for the first 10 years of service. And that is, in fact, all UPSC aspirants are looking at first 10 years. Nobody looks beyond 10 years, because after that, it is sheer drudgery. In policy space, there is no great fun, frankly speaking. Policy space में bureaucracy में बहुत कम innovation हो रहा है और बहुत कम contribution हो रहा है इस समय, because policy is getting more and more complex. And as you know, I think I was reading one of the questions which was about from a lawyer friend of ours. He says, no, what is the non-lawyers doing in policy space? I think that is a very incorrect way of looking at things. Public policy is not about one subject. Public policy is a very broad discipline. And that is why I also don't agree with Parth when he says we have to leave things behind. No, you don't leave anything behind. Everything is part of public policy. I'm an engineer by profession, by training, not profession, training, academics. But yeah, at times I feel that, even that way of thinking applies in public policy. So public policy is not a particular subject. You have to know law. Yes, certainly you have, because you draft laws. So that is why understanding of laws is important. But you have to know economics, because you are talking about economic problems. And there are very microeconomic approaches to policy making in terms of applying microeconomics principle of scarcity, opportunity cost. Those are the things that any policy practitioners will have to make choices. So these choices are made intelligently if you know these concepts. You have to know sociology. How do you deal with social problems unless you know sociology or anthropology, for that matter? You have to know history, because history has so much of learning from the policy perspective that if you're not a good judge of history, if you're not a good student of history, you'll commit the same mistakes again and again and again. So there is no particular discipline which is left. I mean, when we talk about today AI and ML, and somebody has to draft policy, he has to understand technology first. If you don't understand technology, how technology is going to evolve over a period of time, maybe you will not be able to appreciate the policy problem, and maybe not be able to come up with good solutions. Or even if you are not able to come up, in fact, most of the time, it's not that bureaucrat can come up with the right solution. He should be able to judge out of the alternatives presented by experts, which may be the best solution to solve problems. So that acumen, that wisdom, which you acquire over years in terms of dealing with public and dealing with public problems, requires a very broad understanding of subjects. It's not restricted to one discipline, one subject, one course. And that is why in UPSC also now we see that so many people are coming from varied backgrounds, engineers, doctors, chartered accountants, people who have worked in literature. So all these things. And so it's not about a particular subject knowledge which is critical. It's about what we need are skills which are very, very high level skills, and ability to understand the complexities, ability to envision something for the future, and ability to discern what might work best under a given situation. And those are things that you learn over time. There is no particular course which can teach you that. You learn through experience, and you learn through knowledge of others, peer knowledge, and by talking to others, by learning from others. So in that sense, if you see, public policy is not the preserve of the bureaucrats. As I said, first 10 years, if you keep apart, after that, what happens is not the preserve of bureaucrats. Rightly so, because so many things are happening in our country, which no one particular segment of society like a bureaucrat can say, I have complete control over this particular problem. No. If you're talking about health, you have experts on health. Talking about education, you have experts in education. And no one person at anywhere can have intensive knowledge about all the fields. You need an integrator as a bureaucrat. You need somebody who can put all the view perspectives together. Who can bring everybody together, but you need all these everybody. So that is, and we have seen this. We are seeing how now gradually we have more and more think tanks which are emerging. Gradually, more and policy advocacy groups which are emerging. In fact, some sectors like education and health have had very excellent policy advocacy groups, and our health policy and education policy have changed because of that. If you see RTE, for example, RTE did not come out of the bureaucratic closet. It came because of the prayas of certain NGOs who are working in the field of education. They pushed, and then with the help of court, RTE was promulgated. Same thing is happening in health. So this environment, for example, I mean, the contribution which civil society organizations have made, and Parth should be able to tell you better about those things because he heads a civil society organization also, is enormous in terms of environmental regulation and how courts and these NGOs have worked in tandem to create some policies which otherwise bureaucracy may not have. Because, as I said, we sometimes get insulated from the real world. So whether it is the route of NGO policy advocacy kind of route, whether it's the route of like what Rishika is going to do, join a large consultancy firm which works for government and which is able to take a very, I would say, objective view of problems, and who are very good in analytical capacities, which sometimes, or I would say more often than not, we lack in government in terms of handling data, in terms of analysis. So that expertise, which is coming from some of the good consultants, very helpful at times. So that is another route in terms of joining these large consultancies, which now they are everywhere in secretariats, and there are questions about that, but they play a useful role. So one is policy advocacy. Then again, if you just want to, even in a job, in a corporate job, and if you are in a senior position in a corporate at some point of time, you would like to understand how government works, even to do your own business. It is not that you will be contributing directly to public policy, but you should know how policy affects you and how you can influence policy through either individual effort or to collective effort of associations. So these roles, which are known as corporate affairs department or government affairs department of big corporates, now most of the corporates have this department, they require good knowledge of how policies are made, and particularly how you can leverage your position to influence policy, to advocate changes in policy. So there are several routes where you can influence, where you can contribute to policy, public policy making, and in terms of getting satisfaction of doing the similar job that any other person would be doing is sitting in secretariat. In fact, sometimes you get more satisfaction outside because you're able to do job without any political pull or pressure many a times, which is not the case inside. So I think I will stop here at this point of time and reserve my comments on specific questions later. I think we have large number of questions. So if somebody can, Dhruva can screen and then we can respond to some of these questions later after everybody has spoken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajiv. And I think you made a very important point early on in your presentation, that we are not criticizing people who go through UPSC route, right? We are just highlighting the fact that there are multiple ways of serving the country. And I think that's a choice that, of course, people would make themselves, right? So let me invite now Himanshu or Rishika, who wants to go and share your experience of what you have traversed in your own journey so far, and what has been the role of ISPP in that journey.
I just want to say that I really agree with what Rajiv sir said. So I was reading it somewhere that there are two things. One is direction orientation, and the other is destination orientation. Destination orientation is when you say, I want to become a doctor. Direction orientation is when you say that I want to do something that improves people's health. So when you say, I want to do something which improves people's health, you can become a doctor, you can become a nutritionist, you can become the minister of health, you can become, say, an entrepreneur who opens a pharmaceutical company that sells inexpensive medicines. Or you can become an agriculturalist who grows botanical gardens which provide medicinal plants to, say, Ayurvedic companies to create those kind of medicines. So I feel when we say that we have that destination orientation of I want to become a doctor or a civil servant, we sometimes limit ourselves. But when we have that direction orientation, that enables us to explore a lot more opportunities, and it expands our horizons quite a lot. So I feel like post my civil services journey, this is one thought that kept me going and explored the public policy space. So I had prepared for civil services for quite a long time, and I was fortunate to reach the interview stage. That didn't materialize. So I wanted something which was aligned to what I had done previously, which took upon the experiences and the studies that I had done previously. And public policy as a field was the closest that I felt, that it amalgamates a lot of subjects, like Rajiv sir said, sociology, law, economics, and public administration, etc. And it tries to think about designing policies, implementing policies, and evaluating them for public welfare finally. So I think it aligned a lot with my interest, and that is how I decided to go for public policy as a field. My experience with ISPP has been, I would say, wonderful. Coming with a couple of gap years because of the civil services preparation, all I wanted was to re-enter into the workforce and get a foot into the door. But little did I know that within 4 months and 5 months of joining ISPP, I would have my foot in the door of a Big Four consulting firm with the government and public sector in the infrastructure domain. So I think that was quite a turnaround for me. If I had to say the things that I learned here, I would say that a very fundamental, hardcore, practical skills is what I gained at ISPP. So I'm an ex-Infosys, and Narayan Murthy sir would always say, in God we trust, for everything else we need data. So I think data analysis and handling is something that we learned here. Statistics, tools like RStudio and Advanced Excel is something that I gained here. Then I think our critical thinking sir would say persuasion is 25% of the GDP. So be it lawyers or be it consultants or academicians, researchers, business people, persuasion is everything. So policy communication is something which I think is another skill that got added to my myself when I was here, the WCL lab. So everything from writing policy briefs to op-eds to creating narratives in public policy through storytelling, creative ways of that. So that is something that I think has really contributed to my growth. Apart from that, a lot of soft skills, I feel. So I remember we would get a lot of networking opportunities. So I've attended 3 amazing conferences in the last few months. G20, where we got to see and hear Jaishankar up close, then the Raisena Dialogue, and then the PAFI, the Public Affairs Forum of India. So these networking opportunities and conferences is something, the industry exposure is something that I think was tremendous for me. Apart from it, the field experiences that I got while working with the MLSA in Hubli, Dharwad, or even the Pratham and ISPP collaboration for the Asa survey in RK Puram district, which was a one of its kind urban survey that Asa did with us. I think that is something that was pretty important for me per se. And also, I would say that ISPP laid a very strong theoretical foundation for me, which helped me. So when we are learning game theory, and it was a very application-based one also. So when we are learning game theory, it's not just game, you learn game theory.
Oh, I think we lost
lost her.
Rishika. Right. So Himanshu, do you want to
Yeah.
take it forward,
Yeah.
and then we'll come back to
Sure.
Rishika who joins.
Sure. Thank you, ISPP, for having me at this webinar, and it is always a pleasure to come back to the institute and share the journey which I have been undertaking for last 5 years, and ISPP has been a good inflection point in that journey. So prior to joining of ISPP, I was doing the same thing, preparing for the civil services, which is from after my graduation, that is 16 to 19. And I think I also saw many of the folks in the question answer section as well, that many have prepared for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and still are not very sure what to do, take the next. I think I was on the similar path at that point in time, that is 2019. And fortunately for me, ISPP was born a year before, and I was the part of first batch. So I consider myself lucky in that sense that we got to be part of that process in the very first year, because the country was also opening up while it comes to the public policy as a field to the external folks. Prior to maybe a decade ago, the positions were not so very open. They were largely limited to experts, specialists, PhDs, but not so for early professionals like us. And that tide has really turned in the last decade, and we have been, I would say, I have been a beneficiary of that particularly. And in a nutshell, I think the post ISPP journey has nothing sort of what I have had imagined that this is what I would be doing after ISPP, because I just wanted a piece of cake in the larger public policy pie, which I think Professor Kapoor also mentioned, that public policy is all about public at the forefront, right? So therefore, having a shot at the participating in larger public policy process was all in my mind. And one, I would say, an eye opener in this regard, which ISPP has been, was that public policy is not restricted to bureaucrats, which is what we had, I would say, prior to 2019, before joining ISPP, that the only way to work for the public in the field of public policy is through UPSC. There is no other way. That was our worldview, and that has been, I would say, smashed through a very hard hammer. And thanks to all the professors we had at ISPP, and I always reiterate to everybody who has either approached me for ISPP, that whosoever taught us at ISPP, everybody convinced us that their field is the one which drives public policy, be it Parth's market course, or be it Dipankar's sociology course, or Sanjay Baru's political course. Every professor convinced us that their field is the one which drives public policy and nothing else matters. So in that sense, we were, I would say, left confused at the end of the course, but it was a good confusion to be for your brain to be exploded with such thoughts. And therefore, when I entered into the job market, particularly at the time of COVID, and the first thing which I actually did as a part of my job was handling the communications in the COVID war room. And that's when I realized that media, sociology, psychology, how they all come into play together. And that's how one does his or her job into a government sector. And alluding to what Professor Kapoor also said, that the public policy has become very complex in the last 25 years, specifically after the LPG reforms, that every sector of the economy has opened up, and the private sector participation has, I would say, boomed, nothing like in any other sector. And therefore, public policy as a field has been a beneficiary of multiple ideas flowing into this work stream, and therefore there is a lot of scope for folks like us to a larger to play a larger role. And that's what I'm also doing in my current role as the officer on special duty for the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. We are trying to build, I would say, trying to bring a paradigm shift in the digital health. And what the previous panelist also referred, that there are skills, there are tools, there are techniques which the traditional route of UPSC does not serve the current bureaucrats. So therefore, the government also need early career professionals as well as experts to help them in making the policies, to help them drive the digital health mission, to help them drive the UPI. These new novel initiatives which have been taken by the government, they're not driven entirely by the bureaucrats. They are driven by the experts from the private sector as well as early career professionals. And of course, there are bureaucrats who help us putting everything together at one place. And that has been, I would say, very satisfying at the end when you participate in country's policy making process. And for me, it has been very satisfying at the end, because I've been in the past 4 years after my graduation from ISPP, I have participated in COVID war room. I have participated in health infrastructure mission. I have also managed the oxygen concentrator MIS during the third wave. So all these experiences were, I would say, I was able to do justice to them because of training of ISPP for sure. Because prior to that, the UPSC course, everything which I think many of the attendees who are listening here would know, that the course is very wide, and we always say that the UPSC course is like a unending unending sea. But what I would like to highlight here is that sometimes it only relegates itself to facts and figures and everything. But what ISPP has been able to add and to my skill set was build a logical framework on top of it, where you can make sense of that vast sea of knowledge. And therefore, I've been able to do what in the past 4 years, the different job roles which I've handled. So I would stop here and invite Rishika to continue her bit, and happy to take any questions afterwards. Thank you.
I think before Rishika joins, I think you got the sort of baptism by fire. We did not have a formal internship program in the first year.
Yes.
You were able to get an internship in a sense with the health ministry and sort of handle the communication at the time of the COVID. Now we do have an internship program, which is what Rishika is doing. So we have 2-month full-time internship, which allows people to explore different kinds of opportunities which are available in the public policy domain, and hopefully then figure out what kind of career they want to build. So Rishika, maybe you can talk about that a little bit. And also the fact that you are able to do what we call immersive learning experience, right? And that is during the year while you're taking other courses. And how has that experience been for you?
Yeah. So firstly, I'd like to apologize. I'm sorry, my call just got dropped. And yeah, coming to the internship. So right now I'm interning at the Delhi Model Virtual School. It is a school which comes under the Delhi Board of Secondary Education. So I'm working with the project management team of the Office of Education Minister. And it's a very one-of-a-kind school because it's the first government-led secondary school which is operating entirely online. So everything from I've seen assemblies happening to exams, tests, everything happening online. So basically the aim of the school was to democratize education through EdTech and to make it very inclusive and accessible and effective also at the same time. So there are several students who are unable to attend school because of long distances to their home, because of ill health and disability, and because, say, they want to have some flexibility of time and location because they are preparing for JEE, CUET, NET. So it caters to that kind of students. And I think one of the learnings and one of the things that is helping me here, my ISPP preparation, is again, like I said, data analysis. I can't stress enough how important this skill is, even at the cost of sounding repetitive, because we are doing student profiling here. So we collect a lot of the student data of, say, their gender, their category, the reasons for joining DMVS, and a lot of their technical attendance data also, and we try and find correlations between them. What is the correlation between, say, the attendance to their academic performance? Or say, what is the correlation between their attendance to their test scores, etc. So all of this correlation, drawing upon statistics and everything. Another thing I feel is policy communication. So the Delhi government or any government structure, there are a lot of circulars and notings that go upon. So how do you create a circular, which I also got the opportunity to, that even a peon can understand and even, say, a secretary can understand? So to be that precise, concise, also brief, that everyone from the school principal to the parent can understand that kind of a circular. How do you create something like that? Also, you tend to understand the government structure and everything, and I understand a lot of the technology aspect of it, which we learned in the education domain, digital learning aspect. So a lot of the technology aspect of it, how do proctored assessments work, what are virtual labs, etc. So I feel like this has been quite an enriching experience for me, and I feel it's a good thing that we have a 2-month internship, because it's a very good transition from the academics to the work life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that transition is really nice. Yeah.
Thank you, Rishika. Let me just I think highlight a couple of things. You talked about where you are working now. The mission for that is to democratize education. And I think one of the mission statement for ISPP is to democratize public policy, right? And it is in line of that mission, we decided to have a 1-year program as opposed to a 2-year program, because 1-year program obviously has less or lower opportunity cost, right? You would not forego second year of working that you would have to in a 2-year program. And we decided that 1 year is good enough to train people. Of course, becomes a very rigorous program, as all of you would probably testify to it. It does take away a lot of time and energy to do well in the program, but I think it's really worth it in the sense of preparing you to do well immediately after, to be able to stand on your own feet, right? Then if you are looking to stand on your own feet as soon as you graduate from the program. So I think that's an important part, that why we are 1-year program and not a 2-year program. I think that's a very conscious choice that we, as a designer of the ISPP curriculum, took, right? Second, I think I just highlight the fact that Himanshu and the founding batch, one of the key contributions they have made is to draft an ISPP oath. This is the oath that all of you take at the time of graduation, right? And it's a interesting oath to remind people about the commitment they have made to the Indian Constitution and constitutional values, commitment they make to larger society and the welfare of larger society, right? I think those are the things in which hopefully you are also able to contribute to the larger goal for which ISPP has been established. I think I'm going through a few of the questions that I see. And as you also, Rajiv, Himanshu and Rishika, as you see the questions that you want to answer, please pick them up from that list. And there are a large number of those questions, almost 33 that I see in the Q&A section, right? So somebody asked about the Lokniti versus PDM. So PDM is a program which is a full-time program, is a almost 12-month program. We start in August and in July, right? And Lokniti is a hybrid program. So it's a 4-month-long program. It's largely conducted online. We do meet in the beginning of the program on the campus, and we again meet for 3 days at the end of the program on the campus. But other than those 2 meetings on the campus, the rest of the learning happens online, right? And that's a 4-month program, not a full year program. So PDM is a full-time 1-year program. Lokniti is a part-time, you can say a hybrid online program for 4 months, right? So that's the distinction between the two. One of the things I think I should highlight before you can take the other questions is the partnership with U Chicago. I think you talked about what you learned in data analysis and policy communication. I think other thing that you also learned at ISPP through the partnership with the Harris School of Public Policy at Chicago is the global perspective, right? So we have sort of series of 10 lectures, which creates this sort of separate course within the ISPP. And through that, those lectures delivered by U Chicago faculty and other alumni gives you a global perspective on not just what's going on in India, but what's going on around the world and how serious research is being done. And I think, as you know, quite a few of our graduates have gone to higher studies, doing masters abroad as well as doing PhD abroad, right? And I think in some sense, the Harris partnership allows people to prepare for that kind of higher studies if that is what they want to do. Let me open if you want to take any other questions from the list, Rajiv, Himanshu, or Rishika.
So I can see a question which somebody has asked. They say, how do we frame our UPSC experience while moving forward with jobs? And trying to figure out how to frame what looks like a gap in the CV. So I had this question too when I was coming here, but I would say just be confident that you've learned a lot during that time. So you can mention your subjects that you've learned. You can talk about all those experiences and those learnings that you had. And also I remember my design thinking sir, he was talking once about reframing the situation. So when we are in civil services, we give prelims, we give mains and interview, and if we don't get through, we come back to prelims. So it feels like a cycle. But he said it's actually not a cycle if you come to think of it, it's a helix. Because every time you're coming back in the circle, you're one step forward. You may not have a linear progression, but you're still moving upwards. So I think it's very important for you to think of your gap years not as something stagnated, where you did nothing or you were at ground zero, but to realize that you were actually learning in that process. You may not have cleared the exam, but you learned it. And whatever learnings you had, you can always put all of those in your experience and everything.
I think one question which I would like to answer is, as I said, there are several questions about ISPP admission process, scholarships, and placement. Maybe Parth or someone would like to answer that. But one question which I want to answer is somebody has asked, should I do an MBA versus the public policy course? And what is the remuneration? I think that's a very interesting question, but more very straightforward answer. If your heart doesn't beat for public policy, for working with people, then don't do it. Don't do it. You won't get so much money out of public policy career like maybe possibly in the MBA career. So don't waste your time if you don't actually feel about doing something for the public in the public arena, because you have to have that desire. Even IAS, if you don't really want to work in the field and do something for the betterment, maybe you can't. Maybe you will fail. But if you don't have the desire, and if you don't think you'll get your kicks out of that, then don't opt for a career, because there is no point, and you will get frustrated. So that clarity should be there in your mind. MBA has a certain kind of corporate careers in front of you, and maybe in consultancies also. And public policy career would be very different and lots of struggles. But if you get excited by solving even the smallest problem of public, do it. You won't get that chance and you won't get that satisfaction maybe in a corporate career that way. I mean, again, I'm not belittling corporate career. Though that gives you different kind of kicks. So not everybody is gets kicks out of that. If you get your quick kicks out of selling Coca-Cola, go and sell it, and that's a good job. Do it because you're adding value to the economy. No harm. But if you get your kicks out of solving problems of primary education in rural areas of country, and that will give you a kick, do that. Maybe not so much money there. You don't compare on the money metric there. That is one question that I thought was important to clarify. You have to have your heart towards public causes and then only pursue it. Otherwise, there is no point in wasting your time. And at the end of the day, after 20, 25 years, 30 years, when you take stock, you would remember only those things which gave you kicks, not the money, not the wealth that you acquired. That won't give you so much of satisfaction. That we can tell you from experience. Something which you did, something which kicked you, which made you happy, made you recognized by others, that will give you satisfaction. Not the amount of money you have or one bungalow, 2 cars, etc., etc. That won't give you that kind of satisfaction.
think
You need
it is
So,
very good point, Rajiv, that unless your heart beats for public policy, you should not be in public policy. I think it's important to keep that in mind where your heart lies, right? At the same time, I think Ed Rishika pointed out he's joining EY, right? So he's going to join EY on graduation. And so that's, of course, the private sector as much a corporate job as one can imagine, right? So in great thing that has happened in the last few years, because of the fact that the ISPP and many such policy schools are now coming up, is that many of the consultancies are opening up. They realize that MBS can only do certain things. To do the kind of work they want to do with the government in the public affairs department of the consultancies like EY or PwC, they need to have public policy people on the team, right? And that's really is now one of the biggest hiring that happens because they realize this need. And I think it's also part of the mission of ISPP, because we believe that, when you go to, for example, much of the government work now gets done outside the government, right? So when I go and meet with the secretary of a ministry, the person sitting at the table taking notes, right? Sending me the summary of the meeting, asking me about the next meeting and what would happen between now and then, right? Is all of that work is done by consultant from PwC who's sitting at the table, right? So much of the work now is even within the government is getting done through consultants. One can, of course, debate whether that's a good thing, bad thing from the country's point of view, but that's really is the reality today, right? And so you find, for example, many of the foundations and the think tanks run PMUs, project management units within departments and ministries, right? So they put 4 or 5 people from their organization who would then run the program within the ministry or the department. So for example, in Janagra, one of the think tanks in Bangalore has been hiring several people from ISPP. Most of them are hired by Jana, but they work in the government, right? So I think that's an important way to think about how through the public policy route, you can work with and almost in the government, which is what Himanshu is doing, right? Without being a formal civil servant, right? I think that's
what I actually wanted to double tap and apprise the audience about it. That while I work in the government, I sit in a government office and everything, but I'm not on a government payroll. I am actually a part of University of Chicago Trust Fellowship, which is run in the country, and they work on donors' money, which is philanthropic money. So I'm neither in the private sector nor on the government side. I'm somewhere in between, where I'm being on the payrolls of the non-profit and trust organizations, which are in turn funded by the philanthropic organization. So these are also upcoming areas and opportunities in the field where these I would say niche areas are also being catered by the government, and they are also looked very positively by the government. Because my association for the past 4 years have been with the health ministry, and I've been privy to those folks working from multiple such agencies, be it UNDP, be it JAPIGO, be it USAID, be it ADB, be it World Bank. So all these entities which are neither associated with the government, they are just placing folks within the government system in order to aid the capacity of the government, help them in drafting some one or the other program or running one or the other program. So these are upcoming areas which I think if it again goes back to what Professor Kapoor said, that if your heart beats for the public policy, you will not mind to play a even smaller role in the government setup, because within the government setup, even a press note which is put out by PIB is a policy document at the end, because many of the UPSC aspirants would know that in the moments of doubt, we usually refer to those PIB press releases, that what has the government put out in the public domain, because that is also a policy document at the end. And after 10 years, if you want to look at what happened during the pandemic times, then you will refer to the PIB notes. That is the only source of information in the public. And I have been fortunate enough to draft those press releases, press notes during the pandemic time. So that has been part of the institutional memory. One of the aspect which I wanted to also double click what Professor Kapoor said is that while uh, while being in the public policy space, we should be mindful of not having such some lofty dreams that if you become a part of government, you will drive the entire policy. Because that again is a very, I would say, dangerous notion to have, that you will or the person will have a complete control over a single policy in order to drive it from scratch to the final approval. The usually folks within the government setup, either they are permanent employees, they are consultants, or they are non-profit employees. Everybody is playing their bit, their role, which is to lobby the next individual in the series, and everybody then adds on to their thought, and that's where the decision making becomes coherent, holistic, and also become foolproof. Because otherwise, if one person is driving entire policy end to end, it will have certain problems. So therefore, it will again boil down to the same thing which Professor Kapoor mentioned, that your heart should beat for public policy. Your contribution should not be viewed from the outcome lens, that what you contributed, has it been the final a part of final document or not. If it is in the incremental journey route, I think you have done your job, and you will feel satisfied. That has been the experience for the past 5 years for me as well.
I think some of the things that you mentioned are also taught in the Antarang Leadership Lab, right?
Correct.
So we have a leader lab that goes throughout the year, which talks about some of the skills that you need to be a successful team player, right? To be able to work with teams with different ideas and different ways of thinking, right? Different backgrounds. Also, it teaches you several sort of soft skills, which are known as soft skills, but very important skills in public policy. Communication in public policy is very different and very important. How do you persuade people with data and with sort of on the ground stories about people's experiences to why particular policy approach is a better approach than other, right? So those are very important skills. So just to summarize in terms of our discussion on the where you can go from public after public policy degree, right? Is that you can go into sort of consultancies like EY that Rishika is at, or PwC and many others where our graduates have gone. You can join some of the think tanks and foundations, which then would place you in government like Janagraha and Samagra and many others that exist, right? You can also join the Young Professionals Program. There are, for example, Niti Aayog hires tens of people every year as young professionals within the Niti Aayog. And those are the areas where public policy would play an important role in securing you that position, right? Of course, there are chief minister fellowships opening up everywhere. So that's the other route through which you will be able to work pretty much on the ground that Rajiv talked about in his first 10 years of career as civil servant. And obviously, there are lateral entries. Some of you may be senior enough, some of you may be too junior for that. But that's also other route that is opening up, not just in the central government, which has been largely the focus so far, but also at the state level. So Karnataka has opened that route. Rajasthan has been talking about it, right? So many states governments, and hopefully now I suspect even city governments, which is where we need to focus in terms of the governance, even they are opening up lateral entry into the system. So I think there are many, many ways through which you will be able to join and contribute to nation building. I would say even these people working within place in the government, much of the government work also gets done through other entities, right? For example, we worked on skilling area, and much of the work in skilling sector is done by NSDC, right? National Skill Development Corporation, which is sort of semi-private, semi-government entity, right? Now their pay scale, their hiring structure, all of that are not government pay scales and hiring rules. They can hire as like any other private entity and pay whatever the market would demand, right? So I think the idea that you would have to also take a pay cut to work in public policy is no longer really the case, because you are working with entities, right, that are outside the government payroll structure, and they can pay you what is really what you would command given your experience and expertise. Are there any other questions that you want to pick up? Rajiv, Rishika, Himanshu?
I think one of the questions which I see and is about what is the next opportunity? Is it not a fixed job as like a private or government job? Because PMUs at the end, they are working for a specific project within the government setup, right? Either they are working for, uh, let's say, a skill development ministry, and then the PMUs will shift. So in that regard, if you are a employee of a consultancy company, either big four, anybody, and if you are on their payroll, they will shift you from one project to another. And just like bureaucracy also rotates from one ministry to another ministry, this is something similar for, but it will eventually depend upon your interest, which you will bring in. Let's say if you want to work in healthcare, then initially you would be working on primary health, then you can move into healthcare financing, then you can move to healthcare infrastructure. It will depend upon your interest within the consultancy company and the projects which they will bring in. And just to add on to it, I think that there is a lot of anxiety, and rightly so, because public policy as a career is also evolving in the country, and therefore these uncertainty do kick in, that what happens after the project is over. But my belief and my experience in the past 4 to 5 years has been that once you are in the space, and again I'll repeat the same thing which Professor Kapoor mentioned, if your heart beats for it, you will find the way, you will create the path for yourself where you want to end up. It will eventually depend upon your calling, that whether the area or the domain which you are looking for has clicked for you or not.
Thank you, Himanshu.
Also, somebody is asking what are the skills required for consulting. So I would say you can go through a lot of case studies, Harvard case studies and guesstimates, which are very important. We did that at ISPP also. And also advanced Excel, statistics, econometrics. These are the other 3 data related skills, which I think are very, very crucial. Apart from it, I think making persuasive presentations is something which was specifically mentioned in my job description of EY. So please, these are very simple tools, but they are very effective and very important for a consultant. So if you take care of these 6 aspects, I think you should be sorted.
And the data and statistics will now be taught by Rajiv Kapoor himself. I think he brings a very unique perspective of a practitioner and looking at how to adapt some of the theory to practice. And I think case study method that he is going to be using is going to be very interesting way to learn statistics and data. Are there any other questions? I'm also glancing through them. I know there are almost 79 questions, quite a few. I think in terms of scholarships, as a policy, ISPP gives out almost 20% of what we have in the fee, what we collect in the fees, right? So there's quite a good amount of money available as for what we call assistantship. And that is part of the...
If I can interrupt for a second, I think it's maybe, if I am not wrong, you should clarify that ISPP is run by a non-profit.
Yes, it is a non-profit Section 8 company.
It is not a. It's a Section 8 company. It is not a profit making. It is not supposed to make profit. So it's not for profit, not for profit.
And importantly, I should maybe highlight, since people are asking that question.
Because some of the questions about stipend and cost. It is only for the recovery of the cost which is required to run a national level program like this. Because ISPP itself is not into making profits. That should be made clear, unlike several other institutions.
Very, very good point. I think people may find that our fees are high, and we are actually one of the premier programs in the country. And we offer that kind of learning and teaching opportunities at ISPP. But even with that fee that we have, we only cover half of the cost through the fees. Other half is still covered by philanthropy, right? And that's an important sort of point to keep in mind. I'm always surprised about people who make money in education. I have never figured that out. How does one even break even? We are not even able to break even with the fees that we charge, right? But I think that's a separate issue. There are a lot of people committed to public policy and, of course, helping people to learn this skill, because people realize these are very important skills for India at this juncture that we are. If I'm going to benefit by demographic dividend, the global opportunities which are coming up, China +1, and all of those options that we have, we need to have more public policy people, not just in Delhi, not just in even state capitals, but also in major cities of India, right? And maybe even at the district level. So I think we need a large number of public policy professionals to be able to serve the cause of public welfare. And I'm looking forward to having some of you who have joined the program today to join us for that journey. I think I don't really see any more questions. I think we answered most of them. Srija, do you want to?
Maybe I would suggest that maybe you should have a call center just to answer queries about admission. Maybe you already have. Next 10 days.
Actually, the person who just joined that role, she comes from political consultancy.
Okay.
So that's another area of work that one can see as a public policy professional. And Ms. Dua can put up the number if you can hear, so people can call that number to ask specific questions that they have, and maybe some.
They have yes, large number. I think majority of questions are on that admission process, about tests, about
yes,
about scholarships, and maybe that.
And we also have short videos on the website that explains the whole admission process, each of the steps, even how to prepare for the test that we do. And there is a live support also available to you to guide you in terms of what you need to look at to do well in the exam, right? Our idea is not to fail people. Our idea is to empower them so you do well in the exam and hopefully also well at ISPP.
Some of the information that everyone's requesting is already provided in the chat. So if they were to check that, I think they'd be like, it'll help them. So a lot of the links in the videos, further links are provided in the chat. So please make sure you can check them. And I'd like to thank all of the panelists today for their valuable insights. And for everyone who's joined us, I hope your interest for public policy has been piqued. And if you're already looking for a career in public policy, you're welcome. And I hope a lot of your questions and queries have been answered. And I know UPSC can be a very difficult journey, but I hope you've gotten some sort of idea of what to do after UPSC, and that there are possibilities that you can pursue after UPSC, and it's not an end in itself. And if you need any more information, you can always check our website. And just make sure that if you're trying to apply to ISPP, the last day to apply is 30th June. And so please make sure you do before that and start your process. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for the session. It was really exciting and answered a lot of my questions as well. And as a student of ISPP, and I think this has been very helpful for all of us here, and I can speak for everyone. And I hope to see you all here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add that ISPP should really be proud of alumni like Himanshu and Rishika for being so articulate and persuasive. Very happy with what you have done. Rishika is about to begin the journey, but Himanshu has already completed 3-4 years. So I think ISPP can be proud of you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.